Welcome back to the channel. Today is day 2 on this thing. The goal for today is to get everything stripped down and prepped to get the new drivetrain in. So the engine mounts and everything are going to get cut off. We're going to clean the entire frame rails, get rid of anything in the engine bay that we do not need, and then the reason I'm leaving the rear axle in it, or front axle in it, is because I want to be able to just kind of place the engine where I need it, make sure that it clears the hood and doesn't hang too low in the way of the axle. This 3-link setup will end up moving a tiny bit forwards compared to this one, just so we don't have firewall issues. So we're gonna get everything cleaned up, and then we will move on to getting the engine cleaned up, and we're gonna end up removing the transfer case or transmission so that we can get the engine in and out without having to dive all that in repeatedly until the engine's mounted. Once the engine's mounted where I want it, then we can start figuring out the transmission and transfer case setup. So let's get to work. It's going to be a lot of cleanup type of stuff, but gotta get it all prepped so we can start building. Alright, we got all the AC stuff out of the engine bay. I'm going to just cap those for now. We'll pull those out of the truck. We're going to be deleting the AC system on this one, and so we don't need any of that. So we're going to get that deleted. So next up, I'm going to try and get all the power steering stuff removed because the cooler's underneath the truck. We want to move it up here, but also this reservoir has to be on this side for the 3/4 since the power steering pump is on that side. So we're gonna pull all that, and then we'll start stripping everything down, get this all cleaned up so we can get the frame prep for new motor mounts. All right, so I went through a bunch of the wiring. That's going to be a process to get all separated since there's a lot of stuff intermixed, but we're going to be stripping everything we don't need. And the power steering lines I got all the way back to pretty much here. So I'm going to finish taking this cooler out real quick, and then that way we can relocate that when that time comes. And then we'll finish getting this all stripped down so we can start setting that motor in here. Alright, so we just pulled these heat shields real quick. The biggest reason is the exhaust is going to be on this side with that motor. We might change it to the other side just because the fuel tank's on this side anyways. So we'll see how that goes. If we can reuse those heat shields, we will. But for now, we just want an easy space to work with so we can get everything set up. So once Once everything's all done, we'll see if we're gonna use them, but if not, that's okay. All right, so everything is removed out of the engine bay in order to get the motor set in. I am going to leave these motor mounts for the time being just to see where things line up, and then we'll modify as need be. The wiring's still a mess, which I will get to, but I want to get the motor set in here and figure out the mounting before I worry about the wiring. So now it's time to strip this thing down. We are going to pull everything off that we don't need, so the AC compressor and the tensioner for that. And then get as much wiring off as we can. We'll pull this clutch fan off since we're using an electric fan, and then we'll pull this transmission off. I'm probably not going to pull all the wiring off quite yet, just because I have to pull the intake, but if it gets in the way, I'll yank it off. And then I do have the stock crossover tube, which comes behind the head, so I'll probably bolt that on so that I can make sure I'm not too close to the firewall. Well, that's pretty much as small as this is going to get without pulling the wiring off all the way. I will be pulling the coil packs and whatnot, but with the wiring how it is underneath the valve covers, it's just I'd rather just put it in and start mocking things up. So let's get the transmission pulled. With this all ready to go, I just wrapped the wiring on top for now. We're going to set this in there and see where the motor mounts compared to the stock motor mounts line up height wise, because I know we're gonna have to cut these off to get the motor to sit right, but just to see what height wise is so I can get a better picture of it. Alright, so obviously it doesn't sit all the way in there. This motor mount is pretty much set. This side, it's a little bit too wide, so it's pretty high on it. But it gives me an idea and a point to measure off of, as well as it looks like I should be able to come back another inch or two. The front has plenty of space for the fan and radiator, but I want to move it back a little bit so that my oil pan and engine is farther back for the front axle. So it's going to be a whole lot of motor in this tiny little engine bay. Should be fun. I know that mine is 3.4, but it's not technically a first gen. It has body panels and a cab, but the whole frame rails and all that were hand built on mine, so it's a little bit different than this one. All right, took a couple measurements. Obviously you can see the entire engine sticks over where the hood's going to be. So I took a couple measurements to get this set back and down a little bit. So now we're going to pull it, cut off the motor mounts, and clean the frame rails so that we can prep for the new mounts. Alright, we got the old engine mounts all cut off and the frame all cleaned up. We'll get it completely clean with a wire wheel, but I want to get the engine back in here and figure out the exact location so I can start designing the mounts. Well, it's a tiny bit crooked at the moment, and it takes up a lot of space in the engine bay. But this is about where it's going to have to live. I'm going to get the stock motor mounts, which are currently below the frame rails. I'm going to have to pull those completely off, make whole new motor mounts, which is fine. I have files and stuff for that, since that's how I mounted mine. And then we got to get this thing set and actually mounted. Right now it barely clears the steering shaft. The exhaust is going to be really tight and is kind of over the frame rails. So we're gonna have to pull this motor and put it back in probably quite a few times, but this is pretty close to where it's gonna live. So I just gotta get these motor mounts stripped down and make some new ones. So pulled the engine back out, yanked the motor mounts off of it, and we are going to pull all the wiring just to make this thing a lot cleaner and simpler to work with. All right, we got all the wiring completely stripped off of this thing, and that is all the wiring. So now we are going to make the motor mount plates real quick. That way we can start building off of it once it's set back where we want it in the truck. Alright, we got the new motor mount plates on. So let's get this thing back in the truck, and that way we can have something to mount to. Alright, got it back in and pretty much set. I think we're going to have to raise it just a hair. Alternator's pretty close. This side looking pretty good on clearance. The manifold is just barely under the hood. So we're probably gonna have to do a tiny bit of a hood scoop to pull this up a little bit, because all of our clearances down here are very tight, and obviously we want more up travel than an inch from where it's at. We want quite a bit, so play around with that a little bit and then make mounts. All right, we got the motor set exactly where we want, so now we're going to throw together some mounts. So I'll get the plates cut out on the table real quick, and then we can start getting everything mocked up. Alright, so we got these all cleaned up and drilled out, and then instead of using bushings with this sleeve for mock-up, I just ended up getting some pucks. So these pucks fit right in. They're a little bit loose, but it's the same thickness here, and then this guy drops right in, and now we can tack stuff to it and not worry about melting the bushing. Alright, so we're starting on the passenger side. We're going to put these fish plates on first, tack those into place, and then the engine mount itself will go in on top like that. And then once that's all tacked in where I want it, I can build the tube in. All right, we got the motor mounted. Everything's just tacked in case we have to move stuff, but it's mounted, so we should be able to drop this engine hoist. It's harder to see. All right, the engine hoist is off. We still do have some jack stands underneath it, but that's just to keep it from busting those tacks and then leaning backwards. So cool. Engine is in and engine is mounted. Well, the hood actually fits on the back of it is bent down, so that's why there's a gap here. But once we bend that back up, the gap should not be there anymore. But overall, it's fitting. The hood actually comes up in the center just enough. So see if we can work with that and keep a hood scoop off of this thing and work the suspension around the engine. And the exhaust should be pretty easy to build on this side. We raised it up so that the alternator, now if there's a frame rail, we still have to move the box forwards. We're probably gonna end up putting the axle a little bit more forwards than this as well once we put the new axle in. But I don't want to go too much just because it'll look unproportional. So I just want to go enough where it's not going to hit the firewall at all and can clear the track bar and steering box. So that's pretty much it for the day. Thanks for watching.